Hey Eric, Mr. Steve. Good to see you guys. Getting that fire going. There we go. Get a few more people in. Hey everyone. Right. Let's get in. Hey Mr. Steve. Hey, there's Captain Jack. Skits. Hey, we've got it all going now. Nice fire on the go. We've got some more ash, silver birch. We've got some nice plum. Got a bit of apple. I've got a bit of oak for a little while. So we've got plenty to go. Hey there, Timo. Hey, thanks for turning up. Wow, 14 already. Cool. Right. A couple of minutes, we'll get into the Book of the Damned. I don't know if anyone's come across this book at all before. If you have, yeah, well, go and grab yourself a coffee or roll yourself a doobie or defrost a nice lolly. And yeah, don't forget to give a like. That's it, Timo. You tell him. Let me just pop. There you go, cat. Right. So the Book of the Damned was written by Charles Fort. He lived late 19th century. He was around the turn of the century, and he wrote some amazing work that a lot of people have dismissed, mainly because of his character as well. He was a bit of a character, to say the less. You'll you'll hear it in his writing. Uh, he has a bit of arrogance to him, but he only writes down his observations, and he got a lot of his work through a lot of journal, a lot of previous knowledge that was written down. So he's done a lot of research himself. He was a researcher, and a lot of things that will cross-reference. So it's a lot of stuff has just been, I wouldn't say suppressed. It's just not been looked at in the light because science can't give an explanation. And so he's written a whole book of the damned, which is everything to do with science not being able to actually scientifically explain the phenomenon. So I'll let everyone just come in if there's going to be any more before I start. There's Bumblebee. Hey Denise. Mr. Steve. Hey man, there's Yogi. Thanks mate. Got a good fire going. At least you can get to see the fire and then you'll drift off to sleep while you're looking at the flames. I'm just going to go and grab my drink. I hope you've all got drinks. Oh, that's a nice roar of the fire there. Right. So I'm just going to read a few of the little extracts from it as we come across it. I mean, there are 310 pages of this book. It's quite a long-winded book, but nevertheless there's some amazing literature that he's come across. Now, he starts off with a report about Krakatoa. And if you've ever heard of Krakatoa, it was a volcano that erupted on the 28th of August in 1883. It was heard 2,000 miles away. There were 36,000 380 persons killed that day. He said it seems a little unscientific or impositive to me. Marvelled to me, we're not told that it was 2,163 miles and 36,378 persons. The volume of smoke that went up must have been visible. Saw a vast black cloud. In all the textbooks that's mentioned this occurrence, no exception so far as I have read, it is said that the extraordinary atmospheric effects of 1883 were first noticed and last of August until the 1st of September. It is said that this phenomena was caused by particles of volcanic dust that were cast high in the air. But for 7 years, the atmospheric phenomena continued to darken the skies. Where was that volcanic dust all that time? According to the general acceptance, it would have been impossible to demonstrate such a thing. You would have thought that there was a question that would make it trouble, and we haven't studied the hypothesis. We have never tried to demonstrate it. So how could it be possible? But Krakatoa, that's the explanation science gave. We see from the start a very strong inclination of science to deny, as much as it can, external relations of the earth when they cannot fit its remedy. This book is an assemblage of data of external relations upon this earth. We take the position of our data to be damned upon non-consideration for individual merits or demerits, but in conformity with the general exemption to hold for this isolation of the earth. We take the position that science can no more succeed in a similar endeavour. Could the Chinese or could the American states then so with only pseudo consideration of the phenomena in 1883, or as an expression of its isolation or unrelatedness, scientists have perpetrated such an normality as suspicion of volcanic dust with 7 years in the air, disregarding the lapse of several years rather than to omit the arrival of dust from somewhere else beyond the earth. Not that scientists themselves have ever achieved positiveness. Before 1883, Nordic Skolden wrote a great deal upon this theory of cosmic dust, and Professor Cleveland Abe contended against the Krakatoa explanation, but for this the orthodoxy of the main body of scientists. My own chief reason is that the preposterous explanations interfere with some of their own normalities. It could cost me too much to explain if I should ever admit that this Earth's atmosphere has such sustaining power. We shall have the data of things that have gone up in the air and that have stayed in the air for somewhere weeks and months, but not by sustaining power of the Earth's atmosphere. For instance, the turtle of Vicksburg. It seems to me that it would be ridiculous to think that a good-sized turtle hanging for 3 or 4 months, upheld only by the air over the town of Vicksburg. When it comes to the horse and barn, I think they'll be classed someday, but I can never accept that the horse and a barn could float for several months in the Earth's atmosphere. So, it then gives a list of all the sightings for Krakatoa in different areas. The annual register of 1883. The atmospheric effects that have been attributed to the Krakatoa were seen in Trinidad even before the eruption occurred. It had been seen in Natal in South Africa 6 months before the eruption. So, snowflakes the size of saucers have said to have fallen in Nashville, Tennessee in January 24th, 1891. In Montana in the winter of 1887 fell snowflakes 15 inches across and 8 inches thick. The topography and of the intellect, I should say, that we call knowledge of ignorance, surrounding by laughter. There's been reports of black rain, red rain, the fall of 1,000 tons of butter, jet black snow, pink snow, blue hailstones flavoured like oranges, silk and charcoal falling from the sky. About 100 years ago, if anyone was so credulous as to think that stones had ever fallen from the sky, he was reasoned with. In the first place, there are no stones in the sky, therefore no stones can fall from the sky. Or nothing more reasonable or scientific or logic than that could be said upon any subject. The only trouble is the universal trouble, that the major premise is not real, or is intermittently somewhere between realness and unreal. Hey Ryan, nice to see you. Hey Hippie. Hey. Hey, there's London. London Man's in the building. KJV. Nice to see you all. There's Carl. Hey Carl, thanks for turning up. There's Levy. Nice to see you, Levy. Mr. C. Nice to see you all. Nice. Right. Alright. Where are we? So then it is our expression that science relates to real knowledge no more than it does the growth of a plant or an organisation of a department store or the development of a nation. That is all assimilated, all organised, or systematically processed, that represented different attempts to attain a positive state. There can be no real science where there are intermittent variables, but every variable is finite, indeterminated, or irregular, if only have the appearance of being the intermediated is expressed, the regularity is unattained. The invariable or the real and stable would be nothing at all. The external sounds in the mind of a dreamer could not continue to exist in a dreaming mind, because that touch of relative realness would be the awakening and not the dreaming. Science is the attempt to awaken the realness, wherein its attempt to find uniformity, or the regular or inform, would be that nothing external is to be disturbed. By the universal, we mean the real, the notion that is underlying the super attempt at an expression, that the attempt is to regularize the vital spirit inside all. Bugs and stars and chemicals, messes, that they are only quasi-real, and them there is nothing real to know, but a systematicalization of pseudo-data is approximation to realness or final awakening. Or a dreaming mind and its centaurs and canary birds that turn into giraffes. There could be no real biology upon the subtle subjects, no attempt in dreaming minds to systemize such appearances would be moving towards awakening. If better mental coordination is all that we are meant by the state of being awake or relatively awake, so it is that having attempted to systematically, by ignoring external to the greatest possible degree, The notion of things dropping upon this sky from externally is unsettling and as unwelcome to science as tin horns blowing up a musician in a relatively systematic composition. Aligning with the painter's attempt of harmonizing and tracking colours from one to another, or making a political speech at a prayer meeting. If all these things are of a oneness in which the state in term intimated into realness and then unrealness, and if nothing has succeeded in breaking away, we could not continue to exist in this intermediateness. If it should not succeed any more than we could be born at the same time. We shall begin with yellow substances that have fallen upon this earth. They passed away in 1856. The thing was to accept Darwinism. Now many biologists are revolting to try and conceive something else. The thing was to accept it in its day. But Darwinism, of course, was never proved. It was the fittest that survived. What is meant by the fittest? Not the strongest, not the cleverest. The wicked and stupid survive everywhere. There is no way to determine the fittest, except in that it survives. The fittest is just another name for survival. Darwinism, that survivors survive. Although Darwinism seems a positively baseless and absolutely irrational, its massing of supposed data and its attempts to cohere approximate of organizations and consistencies rather than incoherent speculations that precede it. Or Columbus never proved the earth was round. The shadow of the earth on the moon, no one has ever seen it in its entirety. The earth's shadow is much larger than the moon. If the peripheral of the shadow is curved, but the convex moon, a straight-edge object, would be cast a curved shadow upon the surface of that convex. But all the other so-called proofs have been taken the same way. It was impossible for Columbus to prove the earth is round. It is not required, only that it's a higher seeming positiveness. That of his opponents he should attempt it. The thing to do in 1492, but nevertheless to accept that beyond Europe was west and there was other lands. I offered to acceptance that something accordance with the spirit of this first quarter of the 20th century, the expression that beyond are other lands, from which come things from America, float things to Europe. As to this yellow substance that fell to earth, the endeavour was to exclude extra-mundane origins from its dogma, that yellow rain and yellow snow are coloured with pollen from the earth's pine trees. Nevertheless, in 1877, reports of golden yellow snow fell in February the 27th, 1877 in Germany. in which 4 kinds of organisms, not pollen, were the colouring matter. There were minute things shaped like arrows, coffee beans, horns, and discs. They may have been symbols, they may have been objective hieroglyphics. In the Analyse de Chimie in 85, page 28, there's a list of rains said to have contained sulphur. I have 30 or 40 other notes. I'll not use one of them. I'll admit that every one is upon a fallen pollen. I said to begin with that our methods would be the methods of orthologians and scientists, and always begin with the appearance. In the American journal Science, we are told of a yellow substance that fell by a bucketful upon a vessel one windless night in June in Pictou Harbour, Nova Scotia. The writer analysed the substance, and it was to give off a nitrogen and ammonia and an animal odour. Mahogany logs on the coast of Greenland, bugs of a valley on the top of a Mont Blanc, atheists at a prayer meeting, and ice in India. For instance, chemical analysts can reveal that most of any dead men was poisoned with arsenic. Well, because there was no stomach without iron, lead, tin, gold, arsenic in it. And of course, it doesn't matter, because a certain number of persons, as a restraint influence, be executed for murder every year. And if detectives aren't able to detect anything, the illusion of their success is all that is necessary. And it is very honourable to give up one's life for society as a whole. A chemist who found the substance of Pictou sent a sample to the editor. The editor, of course, found pollen in it. My own acceptance is that to have found pollen in it, nothing could very well fall through the air near the pine forest in Nova Scotia and escaping all floating spores of pollen. But the editor does not say the substance contained pollen. He disregards nitrogen, ammonia, and the animal odour, and says the substance was pollen. For the sake of our 30-40 tokens, we can't really be liberal. We grant that the chemist of the first examination probably wouldn't know what an animal odour was, even if he was a janitor at a dog shop. As we go along, however, we can be no more sweeping the ignoring of the phenomena of falling matter from the sky. I'd suggest to start with that we put ourselves in the place from deep sea fishes. How would they account for the fall of animal matter from the above? They wouldn't try, or at least it's easy enough to think that most of us as deep sea fishes of a kind. B. Mueller said a substance reddish varying to yellowish, that fell enormously and successfully on April the 30th, May the 1st, and May the 2nd in France and Spain. That it carbonized and spread the odor of charred animal matter, that it was not pollen, that in alcohol it left a residue of resinous matter. Hundreds and hundreds of tons of this matter must have fallen. Odor of a charred animal matter is what was labelled. Or an aerial battle that occurred 100 years ago, making the diverse remains uniformed in appearance. It's all very absurd, because even though we are told of a prodigious quantity of animal matter that fell from the sky for 3 days in France and Spain, we're just not ready, that's all. He says the substance was not pollen. The vastness of the fall makes it acceptable that it was not pollen, yet the resinous residue does suggest pollen from pine trees. A yellow powder that fell in Cabrera on March the 14th, 1813, it had an earthly taste that was described as unconscious. When heated, this matter turned brown, then black, and then red. One of the components was very green and yellowish, which when dried out was found to be very resinous. Then we turn to loud noises heard in the sky, with stones falling from the sky. According to these, they occurred rather brutal, or not associated with something soft and gentle like the fall of pollen. It was black rain and black snow, rain as black as the deluge of ink, jet black snowflakes. Such rain as that fell in Ireland, May the 14th, 1894. It fell upon a district of 400 square miles and was the colour of ink and a very disagreeable taste. The rain at Castle Common in Ireland in April 30th in 1887 was thick black rain. The black rain fell in October the 8th, 1907. It felt most particular and a disagreeable smell in the air. The orthodox explanation of this rain occurs in Nature, March 1907. Clouds of soot that had come from the South Wales crossed the Irish Channel and all of Ireland. The clouds of soot from the manufacturing towns of northern England and South Scotland were blamed. Of course, the principle of pseudo-logic and the principle of continuity is, of course, that nothing is unique or individual. Supposedly there should be a vast celestial super ocean or interplanetary vessel that comes near this earth and discharges volumes of smoke at a time. We're only supposing that such things now, because conventionally, being modestly and tentative, but if it was so, there would necessarily be some phenomena upon this earth. The extra mundane smoke from the cities merge would manifest in black participation in rain. It's possible to distinguish the phenomena at their merge points, so we look for them at their extremes. Impossible to distinguish between animal and vegetable in some insufura. For all practical purposes, indistinguishable enough. So, black rain fell in Switzerland on January the 20th, 1911. Switzerland is so remote and so ill at ease is the unconventional explanation. It says this rain was certainly conditioned weather. Snow may take on the appearance of blackness, which is very deceptive. Or at night, if black enough, snow may look black. The thing is, it was extreme remoteness from any great manufacturing centre. In August 14, 1888, there fell at the Cape of Good Hope rain so black it was described as a shower of ink. We find that every departure from one merger is entrance upon another. At the Cape of Good Hope, vast volumes of smoke from great manufacturing centres as an explanation cannot very exceptionally merge with the explanation and the extra mundane, but the smoke from a terrestrial volcano can, and that's what's suggested. We take up not only the black rain, but their accompanying phenomena. Black rain fell in the Clyde Valley on March the 1st, 1884. Another black rain fell 2 days later, on the 20th of March, and then again on the 22nd, and then again on September the 4th. More than 24 hours later, more rain, black rain, fell in the same small town, the town of Slains. 140 miles from Slains, more black rain fell. After these showers, vast quantities of substance, some described as pumice stones, and sometimes slag, were washed upon the seas near Slains. An alchemist and chemist's option given that the substance was slag, yet it was not volcanic production, but slag from melting works. Now we have, for black rain in its inconsiderable form, from factory chimneys. Whatever it had been, the quantities of substance, it was so enormous. To produce such works, it would require a united output of all the smelting of works in the world. If slag it were, we would accept that the artificial product has been enormous quantities that have fallen from the sky. The first and second rains corresponded in time with the ordinary ebullitions of Vesuvius. The third and fourth, according to Mr. Rust, corresponded with no known volcanic activity upon this earth. Between October 1863 and January 1866, so that's 3 years, 4 more days of black rain fell in Scotland. The writer of this account tells with a better or more than Mr. Rust can that out of the 8 days of black rain, 5 coincided with the eruptions of Vesuvius and 3 with the eruptions of Etna. The fate of all the explanations is to close one door only to have open and fly open another. I should say that my own notions upon this subject will be considered to be irrational, but at least my gregariousness is satisfied in associating here, or this I can write to those that can think in this rut. I have to say that I can think of 4 discharges from one far distant volcano passing over a great part of Europe, participating nowhere else, discharging precisely over one small town, but also 3 other discharges from another far distant volcano, showing the same precise preference, if not marksmanship, for the same one small town in Scotland. Nor would it be of any better thinking of exploding meteorites and their debris. Precisely, and reoccurrence would be just as difficult to explain. My own notion of this island, near the oceanic trade route, it might receive debris from passing vessels 7 times or in 4 years. In Tim's yearbook in 1851, there is an account of a sort of rumbling as of wagons heard for upwards of an hour without cease in Northampton in England, and 3 days later black rain fell. In Nature Correspondence it is written of an intense darkness at Preston, England, April the 26th, 1884. Black rain at Crow in Worcester later that week, and May the 3rd had fallen again. Another account of black rain upon the 28th of April in Church Sheldon, so intense that the following day the brooks were still dyed with it. According to the 4 accounts, there were earthquakes in England at this time. There was black rain in Canada, November the 9th, 1819. This time it was attributed the black participation smoke of the forest fires south of the Ohio River. The black rain was accompanied by shocks of those of an earthquake. From Edinburgh Philosophical Journal. that the earthquake had occurred at the climax of intense darkness and the fall of black rain. Red rain. Science would like to say red rain is the sand blown by Sirocco from the Sahara in Europe. Especially in the earthquake regions of Europe, there have been many falls of red rain, especially, but not always, precipitated in rain. Upon many occasions, these substances are known as absolutely identified as sand from Sahara. When I first looked at this matter, I came across assurance after assurance so positive to this effect that I had not been an intermediate. I'd have a good look no further. Samples collected from the rain and samples of sand forwarded from the Sahara. Absolute agreement, some of the writers said. Same colour, same particles of quartz, even the same shells. Then the chemicals analysed is not an agreement worth mentioning. But to the mind's rest, there's a satisfaction. That's an expression absolutely identified. Absoluteness, or the illusion of it. The universal quest, don't forget. What's real? If the chemists have identified substances that have fallen in Europe as sand from the African deserts, swept up in African whirlwinds, that's assuaged all the irrationals that occur to those minds that must respond in the concept of a snug, isolated little world free from contact or cosmic wickedness. The only trouble is that the chemist analysts, which seem so final and authoritative to some minds, is no more nearly an absolute than identification by a child or a description by an imbecile. I'll take some of that back. I accept that approximation is higher. But it is based on delusion, because there is no definitionness, no stability, or only stages somewhere between them. There are no chemical elements. The chemical elements are only... Hey, that's enough, Cosmo. Hey. Yeah. Fox is winding him up. His last little one's on. Well, we don't have any raccoons over here. No, the fox cubs. You can hear the fox cubs. They're out already. Right. Another chemist says it was 23% water and organic matter. He identifies this matter as sand, as African sand, but after deducing the organic matter. But you and I can be identified as sand from the African desert after deducing all that there is to accept sand. But we cannot accept that this fall was sand from the Sahara, omitting its obvious objection that its most parts of the Sahara is not red at all, because it's described as dazzling white. It could be that a whirlwind might have carried it, but that in its case would be no superstitious or doubtfully identified whirlwind, but the greatest atmospheric cataclysm in the history of the earth. On the 27th of February, this fall had continued in Belgium, Holland, Germany and Austria. That in some instances it was just not sand, or that most of all the matter was organic. That a vessel had reported the fall as it's occurring in the Atlantic Ocean, midway between Southampton and Barbados. The calculation had given that in England alone 10,000 tons of matter had fallen. It had fallen in Switzerland in 1903. It had fallen in Russia. Not only had vast quantities of matter fallen several months before in Australia, but it was at this time fallen in Australia in 1903. Enormous red mud, 50 tons per square mile. Or every explanation in a Wessex explanation by the attempt to interpret the enormous terms of each minute, but nothing can finally be explained, because by truth we still mean universal, what is real. And for that, if we could only think as wide as universally, right. Let's have a look at something else. Let us have a quick flick through here. Right. Let me find another little piece. There is in the Philosophical Transactions an account of a seeming cereal said to have fallen in Wiltshire in 1686. Said that some of the wheat fell enclosed in hailstones, but the writer in transcripts said that he had examined the grains, and there were nothing but seeds of ivy berries dislodged from holes and chinks where the birds had hidden them. If the birds still hide ivy seeds, and if the wind still blows, I don't see why this phenomenon has not repeated in more than 200 years since. A Dr. A.T. Marchetti writes that London, Ontario, in February 24th, 1864, a violent storm fell with snow, a dark-coloured substance, estimated 500 tons, over a belt 50 miles by 10 miles. It was examined under a microscope, who found it consisted mainly of vegetable matter in far advancing decomposition. He gave his opinion that it was the remains of cereals. He pointed out for months before the fall the ground of Canada had been frozen, so that in this case a more than ordinary remote origin thinks the origin must have come from the south. A report in March the 24th, 1840, during a thunderstorm in Rajkot, India, occurred the fall of grain. It was reported by Colonel Sykes of the British Association. The natives were greatly excited because it was grain of a kind unknown to them. Usually comes forward a science who knows more of the things that natives know best than the natives know. But it so happens that the usual things was not done definitely in this instance. The grain was shown to some botanists who did not immediately recognize it, but though it to be either spartim In the Science magazine, March the 9th, 1888, we read that a block of limestone is said to have fallen near Middlesburg, Florida. The writer in the Science denies that it fell from the sky. His reasoning is that there is no limestone in the sky, therefore this limestone did not fall from the sky. Well, better reasoning I cannot conceive of, because we see things of a final major premises, universal, the true, would include all of these things. But then all that reasoning must be based upon something, not universal. In Pertetel, in France, June 6, 1890, a fall of limestone pebbles, identified with limestone at Chateau Landon, or up or down in a whirlwind, but they fell with hail, which in June could not very be well identified with ice from Chateau Landon. In the Science Gossip in 1887, the editor says lime of stone was reported to have fallen at Little Lever in England, and that a sample had been sent to him, and that in fact it was sandstone. Therefore it had not fallen, but had been on the ground in the first place. But upon page 140 of the Science Gossip, it is an account for a large, smooth, water-worn, gritty sandstone pebble that had been found in the wood of a full-grown beech tree. It looks to me as if it had fallen red hot and had penetrated the tree at high velocity. But I have never heard of anything falling red hot from a whirlwind. The wood around the sandstone pebble was black as if charred. Dr. Farrington, for instance, in his books, does not even mention sandstone. However, it's reported in 1860 that a substance the size of a duck's egg fell in Ireland. It is not definitely said that the substance was sandstone, but it resembled sandstone. Falls of salt have often occurred. They have been avoided by scientific writers because of the dictum that only water, and not substances held in solution, can be raised by evaporation. However, falls of salt water have received attention from Dalton and others, and have been attributed to whirlwinds from the sea. This is so reasonably contested, quasi-reasonably, as to these places are very far from the sea. Especially the fall that occurred at high mountains of Switzerland. Let anything be explained in local terms of the coast of England, but it has also occurred in the high mountains of Switzerland. Large crystals of salt fell in a hailstorm, August the 20th, 1870 in Switzerland. We are told from the scientific rectory in 1872 that these objects of salt came over the Mediterranean from some part of Africa. One reads as such assertion and proves it to be suave in the brief conventional. One seldom questions or thinks very strange and then forgets it. But these sizable masses of salt are described in Emer Journal, essentially perfect cubic crystals of common salt, as one occurrence hailed that can only 1 or 10 or 20 instances be called a coincidence. A translation from a Turkish paper in 1883, a substance that fell at Sakaturi, described as an unknown substance in particles or flakes like snow, was found to be salt to the taste and dissolved readily in water. In the Philosophical Magazine in 1855, a large stone was found far in the interior of a tree in Battersea Fields. Sometimes cannonballs are found embedded in trees. Doesn't seem anything to be discussed. Doesn't seem discussable that anyone would cut a hole in a tree and hide a cannonball, which one could take to bed and hide under his pillow just as easy. So with the stone in Battersea Field, what is there to say except that it fell with high velocity and embedded itself into the tree? Nevertheless, there was a great deal of discussion, because at the foot of the tree, as if it was broken off the stone, fragments of slag were found. I have found nine other instances, slag and cinder ashes, and you won't believe neither I, that came from a furnace of a vast aerial superconstruction. As to ashes, the difficulties are great, because we'd expect many falls of terrestrial derived ashes from volcanoes or forest fires. I suppose that one of our main motives is to show that in any quasi-existence nothing but the preposterous, or something intermediate or absolute preposterous, can be the final resemblance. In the Nature Journal, January 10th, 1884, quotes from a Kimberley newspaper that thick shower of ash fell at Queenstown, South Africa. The matter was marble-sized balls, which were soft and pulpy, which upon drying crumbled at the touch. The shower was confined to a one narrow streak of land. It would be only ordinary preposterous to attribute this substance to Krakatona. But with the fall, loud noises were heard. But I admit many notes upon ash. If ash would sift down upon deep-sea fishes, that is not to say that it came from steamships. Among writers of books, the only one I know who makes more brief mention of coal is Sir Robert Ball. He represents a still more unique orthodox. He is exclusionist of the old type, still holding out against even meteorites. He cites several falls of carbonaceous matter, but with disregards that he makes reasonable that earthy matter may have been caught up in whirlwinds and flung down somewhere else. If he had been given a full list, he would have been called upon the explanations of the whirlwinds for special kind of coal. He does not give a full list at all. We shall all have to that. We shall see against this disease we're writing. His psychotropism was to respond to all reports of carbonous matter fallen from the skies by saying that this damned matter had been deposited upon things of chosen impacts with the earth. How could anyone so resolutely and dogmatically and blindly hold out would puzzle not for our acceptance, but only to think that is excluded or included. Why exclude anything when it's to be included? As to the minute quantities, we are told that the substance that fell at the Cape of Good Hope, it had little more than a quarter of organic matter, in which alcohol, it gives a familiar reaction of a yellow resinous substance. A carbonaceous matter that fell in 1840 had some of the largest, the size of a human head. and a substance that resembled a dull colour of earthly ligament. This also was seen to have been found in Italy, India, France. A substance with an organic combustible ingredients was found in Sweden in 1860. A substance fell in Argentine Republic resembling a certain kind of lignite and boghead coal. It is said that it fell in 1880 in Argentina like brown coal in masses that fell from the sky. A combustible carbonaceous substance that fell with sand in Naples in 1880. 1899, a substance of deep greenish black fell in Russia. It contained 5% of organic matter, which when powdered and digested in alcohol, yielded and evaporated a yellow, bright resin. In this mass was 2% of an unknown material. Cinders and ash, slag and coal, charcoal and coal, and all these things sometimes deep-sea fishes are bumped by. I'm also collecting notes upon persons supposed to be struck by lightning. I think that high approximation of positives have often been achieved. Where are we? The Philosophy magazine in 1857 wrote that a substance that fell in Hungary contained the organic matter of fossil waxes. And limestone, a block of limestone which was said to have reported had fallen in Florida. That something had been seen to have fallen in an old cultivated field. The witness who ran to it picked up something had been upon the ground in the first place. The writer who tells us this, with unusual exclusion of imagination, he thinks he can think of a good-sized stone that had for many years been in a cultivated field, but had never been seen before, had never interfered with the plough. He is earnest and unjarred when he writes that the stone weighs 200 pounds. My own notion, found upon my own experience in seeing, is that a stone weighing 500 pounds might be in one's parlour 20 years virtually unseen, but not in an old cultivated field where it interferes with ploughing, not anywhere. Dr. Hahn said that he had found fossils in meteorites. There is descriptions of corals, sponges, shells, all of them microscopic. Dr. Hahn is a well-known scientist. He was better known after that. He said definitely that he had found fossils in specific meteorites and published his work with photos of them. His book is in the New York Public Library. In the reproductions of every features of some of the little shells in plain markings. If they're not shells, neither are under the oyster counters. The striations are very plain. One sees everything hinged where the bavel is joined. Professor Lawrence Smith of the Knowledge said, Dr. Haynes is a kind of half-insane man whose imagination has run away with him. Then Dr. Wineland examines his specimens. He gave to his opinion that they are fossils and they are not crystals, as asserted by Professor Smith, who had never even seen them. That's the damnation of denial and the damnation of disregard. After this publication of his findings, of course it all went silent. The living things that have come down to this earth attempts to preserve the system. Small frogs and toads, for instance, but never have fallen from the sky. They were always on the ground in the first place. Or that had there been such falls, up from one place in a whirlwind and down in another. There were some especially froggy places in Europe, as there are sandy places. The scientific explanation would of course say that all small frogs fell from the sky in Europe that came from the centre of froggy. Haha. To start with, I'd like to emphasise something that I am permitted to see. That there is not one report of finding of fallen tadpoles from the sky. But in the leisure hours, for accounts of small frogs or toads said to have fallen from the skies, the writer says that all observers must be mistaken, that all the frogs or toads must have fallen from the trees or other places overhead. Tremendous number of little toads, 1 or 2 months old, that have never seemed to fall from the great thick clouds that appeared suddenly in the skies. They had been cloudless in August 1804 near Toulouse in France, according to a letter from Professor Puntus. Many instances of frogs that were seen to fall from the skies account for such falls signed by witnesses. The Scientific American Journal in 1873 states a shower of frogs which darkened the air and covered the ground for a long distance is the reported result of a recent rainstorm in Kansas. As to having been there in the first place, little frogs found in London after a heavy storm in 1838. Little toads were found in a desert after a rainstorm. So to start with, I do not deny positively a conventional explanation of up and down. I think that there may have been such occurrences. In London Times there was an account of a shower of twigs and leaves and tiny toads in a storm upon the slopes of the Alpennese. These may have been ejected from a whirlwind. I add, however, that I have notes upon two other falls of tiny toads in 1883, one in France and one in Tahiti. Also a fish in Scotland. But the phenomena in the Apennines, the mixture seems to be typical with the product of a whirlwind. Their other instances seem to be typical of some kind of migration. There the numbers said to be humongous. Over and over these annals of the damned occurred of the datum. But the whirlwind is thought to be a condition of chaos. A monthly weather review in 1881 states, a small pond in the track of a cloud was sucked dry, the water being carried over the adjoining fields together with a large quantity of soft mud which was scattered over the ground for half a mile around. It is so easy to say that small frogs may have fallen from the sky that had been scooped up by a whirlwind. But here are the circumstances of the scoop. The exclusionist's imagination, there is no regard for mud or debris from the bottom of the pond, floating vegetation, loose things from the floor. The whirlwind precisely picked out only frogs. Of all instances I have attributed the fall of small frogs or toads to a whirlwind, only one definitely identifies or places of the whirlwind. Also, as been said before, a pond going up would be quite interesting as frogs coming down. Whirlwinds we read over and over, but where and what whirlwind? It seems to me that anyone who is lost in a pond would be heard from. A fall of small frogs from a Birmingham in June 30th, 1892 was attributed to a specific whirlwind, but not a word was said to any special pond that had contributed. And something that strikes my attention here is that all these frogs were described as completely white. After one of the greatest hurricanes in history of Ireland, some fish were found as far as 15 yards from the edge of the lake. Falling fish in Paris. That said of a neighbouring pond had been blown dry. The date was not given, but I'd recorded it somewhere. The best known of falling fish had occurred at Mountain Ash in Glamorgan in 1859. The editor of Zoologist, having republished a report of falling fish, writes, "I am continually receiving similar accounts of frogs and fishes, but in all the volumes of Zoologist I can only find 2 reports of such falls. There is nothing to conclude other than hosts of data that have been lost. Does not look favourable upon such results." Dr. Gray of the British Museum writes that some of these fish which have been sent to him alive were very young minnows. He said on reading the evidence, "It seemed to me probably only a practical joke that one of Mr. Nixon's employees had thrown a pail of water upon another who had, though fish in it, had thought had fallen from the sky." Those fish still alive were exhibited in the gardens at Regent's Park. The editor said that one was a minnow and the rest were sticklebacks. Fire's still going. Hey Julie. Let's just stop and say hello to people. Oh, g'day Dino. Hello mate. Oh. I'm gonna give it a little kicky. Right, I'm gonna delve right into it now. Let's get some meat on the bones. the most notable appearance of fish during an earthquake is that of Riobamba. Humboldt sketched four of them, and it's an uncanny looking thing. Thousands of them appeared upon the ground during a tremendous earthquake. Humboldt says that they were cast up from subterranean sources. I think not myself, and have the data for thinking not. But there be such a row arguing back and forth, that it's simpler to consider a clearer instance of the falling of living fish from the sky during an earthquake. I can't quite accept myself whether a large lake and all the fish in it was torn down from another world, or a lake in the Super Siago Sea, distracted between two pulling worlds, was dragged down from this earth. In February 16th, 1861, an earthquake in Singapore. Then came an extraordinary downpour of rain, or as much water as any good-sized lake would consist of. For 3 whole days this rain or fall came down in torrents. The pools on the ground formed by this deluge, great numbers of fish were found. The writer says that he himself seen nothing but water fall from the sky. Whether I'm emphasizing what a deluge it was or not, he says that so terrific had been the downpour that he had not been able to see 3 steps away from it. The natives said that the fish had fallen from the sky. 3 days later, the pools dried up and many of the dead fish were found. So I think to myself that a whole lake full of them had been shaken down from the Super Siago Sea under the circumstances we have thought of. However, if appearance of strange fishes after an earthquake can be more pleasing in the sight, an account of the occurrence in Singapore and record of former occasions submitted to the Academy, that fishes of a new species has occurred in Good Hope after an earthquake. It seemed proper, it will lustre the new and now to have the existence in which not merely a quake and the falls of rock, or a quake and either eclipse or luminous appearance in the sky would have occurred, but in a combination of all the phenomena, or one or more in which they complying earthquakes indicate a proximity of another world. There is an account by the Deputy Commissioner That an extraordinary meteorite was coated with ice. That within the few months before the fall of this meteorite, there had been a fall of live fishes in Buenos Aires, a shower of red substances, and a dark spot observed on the disk of the sun, followed by an earthquake and an unnatural darkness for some duration, and then a luminous appearance in the sky that looked like an aurora borealis. But there's more to this climax. We are introduced to a new order of phenomena. There is another matter in which the negative absolute seems to work against us. The data are all of falls and not of the upward transitions. Of course, upward impulses are common during earthquakes, but I haven't the datum upon a tree or a fish or a brick or a man that ever did go up and stayed up, that never did come down again. Our classic of a horse and barn occurred in what called the whirlwind. It is said that in earthquake, paving stones shot far up in the air. A writer does not specifically say that they came down again, but something seems to tell me that they did. There was a corpse in Riobamba. Humboldt reported that a quake in Riobamba, bodies were torn upwards from their graves. The vertical position was so strong that the bodies were tossed several hundred feet in the air. I explained again that the centre of this great violence of an earthquake, anything ever, has gone up and has kept going on up. The thoughts of the nearest observer were likely upon other subjects. The quay of Lisbon, we are told that it went down. A vast throng of persons ran to the quay for refuge. The city of Lisbon was in profound darkness. The quay and all the people on it disappeared, as if they all went down. Not a single corpse, not a shred of clothes, not a plank on the quay, not so much a splinter of it ever surfaced or floated. In the zoologist, it's recorded in an instance of a bird, a puffin, that had fallen to the ground with a fractured head. Interesting, but mere speculation. But what solid object high in the air had struck the bird? Tremendous red rain in France, and a great storm at the time, with red rain supposedly to be coloured by the swept matter from the Earth's surface, and then precipitates. But in Comte Renders of France, the description of this red rain differs from one's impression of red, sandy, or muddy water. It is said that this rain was so vividly red and so blood-like that many persons in France were terrified. One chemist notes the great quantity, whether blood-like or not, in the matter. It may have been an interplanetary dragon that had been slain somewhere, or that is red fluid in which many of this came from something altogether pleasant. Or perhaps the presence datum that the substance of lark, quail, duck, and water hen, and some of them alive, fell at Lyon and Grenoble and some other places. I have notes upon other birds that have fallen from the skies and accompanied with red rain, making the falls of the bird in France quite particular. On the other notes upon these birds that have fallen from the sky in the midst of storms or of exhaustion, but living birds, birds fallen not far from storm areas. But now we shall have an instance for which I can find no parallel. The fall of dead birds from a clear sky, far distant from any storm from which they could be contributed, so remote from any discoverable storm. My own notion is that in the summer of 1896, something or some beings came as near to this earth as we could upon a hunting expedition. And in the summer of 1896, an expedition of super scientists pass over this land and let down a dragnet, and whatever it would catch would sweep through the air, supposing it to have not quite reached the earth. It is written in Philadelphia Times in the streets of Baton Rouge in LA, and from clear skies fell hundreds and hundreds of dead birds. There were wild ducks, catbirds, woodpeckers, many birds of strange plumage, some even resembling canaries. Usually one does not look very far from any place to learn of a storm, but at best that could be done for this instance was to say there had been a storm on the coast of Florida. And for those with the psychochemic repulsion for this explanation, the reader only momentarily astonishment that dead birds from a storm in Florida should fall from an unstormy sky in Louisiana. It was from a clear sky, or a sky in which there were no driven clouds, or other evidence of still continuing wind power. If a storm in Florida could be accepted, that hundreds of birds have fallen far away in Louisiana. So leaves of trees carried up there in whirlwinds stay there for years, ages, perhaps only a few months, but then falling to this earth at an unseasonable time for dead leaves. Fishes carried up there, some of them dying and drying, some of them living in volumes of water that are in abundance up there. And then there are some of them that fall in deluges that we call cloudbursts. The astronomers won't think kindly of us, and we haven't really met the endearing ourselves to the meteorologists yet. In the Scientific America, there is account of some hay that fell from the sky. From the circumstances, we incline to accept that this hay went up in a whirlwind from this earth in the first place, and remained there for a long time before falling. That upon July 27th, 1875, small masses of damp hay had fallen on Monkstown Island. He had found nearby a whirlwind to the south of Monkstown that coincided, and a similar fall had occurred in Wrexham, England, 2 days before. In November 1918, I made some studies upon light objects thrown into the air on Armistice Day. I suppose I should have been more emotionally occupied, but I made some notes upon torn up papers and threw them high in the air from the window of an office building. Scraps of paper did not stay together for a while. That upon 10th of April 1864, in France, a great number of oak leaves, enormous segregation of them, fell from the sky. on a very calm day. So little wind that the leaves fell almost vertically. Fall lasted about 10 minutes. A Dr. Flammation in the atmosphere tells of this story. He has to find a storm. He does find a squall, and it occurred upon the 3rd of April. His two incredibilities are that the leaves could remain in the weeks in the air, that they could stay together a week in the air, and then think of some of your own observations upon the papers thrown from an aeroplane. One of our incredibilities is that the leaves have been whirled up to 6 months before, when they were commonly on the ground, and had been sustained, of course, not in the air. I have no records of any leaves that have fallen from the ground in October or November, the seasons when one might expect dead leaves to be raised from one place and precipitated somewhere else. I did emphasise that this all occurred in April. Upon that, April the 19th, dried leaves of different species, oak and elm, etc., fell from the sky. This day too was calm day, and the fall was tremendous. The leaves were seen to fall 15 minutes, but judging from the quantity on the ground, it is the winter, in my opinion, that had already been fallen for half an hour. If I were a painter, I'd like that subject. But the character of dried leaves is a study in the rhythms of the dead. The river of streams of leaves were as far as he could see. That upon the 7th of April, dried leaves fell in France for half an hour, and then again on the 11th, a fall of dry leaves occurred. Their explanation was that these leaves had been caught up in a cyclone, which had expended its force, and that the heavier of its leaves had fallen first. We think that was all right for 1894, and it was quite good enough for 1894. But it's these exact days that we want to know how wind power insufficient to hold leaves in the air could sustain others for 4 days. These factors are expressions for unseasonableness, but not for dried leaves, or a prodigious number of leaves, direct fall, a windlessness, month of May, and localized in the same place. The factor of localization is very interesting. Clippings from the Royal Gazette of Bermuda of September the 8th, 1885, that upon 8:30 a.m. there was observed by Mrs. Adelaine D. Bassett a strange object in the clouds coming from the north. She called the attention of Mrs. L. Lowell to it, and they were both somewhat alarmed. However, they continued to watch the object steadily for some time. It drew nearer. It was of a triangular shape. It seemed to be the size of a small boat mainsail, with chains attached to the bottom of it. Whilst crossing the land, it had appeared to descend, but as it went out to the sea, it ascended and continued to ascend until it lost sight high into the clouds. Or with such power to ascend, I don't think much myself of the notion that it was an escaped balloon, partly deflated. Nevertheless, General Lefroy attempts to give it a terrestrial interpretation. He argues that anything may have been a balloon that had escaped from France or England, or the only aerial thing of terrestrial origin, even to this date of about 35 years later, has been thought to have crossed the Atlantic Sea. He accounts for the triangular form by deflation, a shapeless bag, barely able to float. My own acceptance is that the great deflation does not accord with observations upon its power to ascend. In the Times, October the 1st, 1885, Charles Harding of the RMS argues that if it had been a balloon from Europe, surely it would have been seen and reported by many vessels. Whether he was as good as a Brit or the General or not, he shows awareness, or the things that may have been partly collapsed balloon that escaped from the United States. He took the trouble to write to a friend of his, W.H. Gosling of Bermuda, who also was an extraordinary person, who even went to the trouble of interviewing Mrs. Bassett and Mrs. Lowell himself. Their description to him was somewhat different. An object from which nets were suspended, deflated balloon with its network hanging from it, a super dragnet, that something was trawling overhead. Mr. Gosling wrote that the items of chains or suggestion of a basket that had been attached had originated with Mr. Bassett, who had not seen the object. Mr. Gosling mentioned a balloon that had escaped from Paris in June. He tells of a balloon that fell in Chicago, or 3 weeks later than the Bermuda object. So it's one incredibility against another. In the Nature Correspondence, Charles Tyndall Smith writes, at Chisbury, Wiltshire, England, in April the 8th, 1912, he saw something in the sky, unlike anything that I'd ever seen before. Although I have studied the sky for many years, I have never seen anything like it, he says. He saw two stationary dark patches upon clouds. They were stationary upon clouds that were rapidly moving. They were in a fan fate or triangular and varied in sizes, but kept the same position upon different clouds as cloud after cloud came along. For more than half an hour Mr. Smith watched these dark patches. His impression as to the one that appeared first, that it was a really heavy shadow cast upon a thin veil of clouds by some unseen object away to the west, which was intercepting the sun's rays. In the same volume of Nature is another letter and another correspondent to the effect of the similar shadow are cast on the mountains upon the clouds, and that no doubt that Mr. Smith was right in attributing the appearance to some unseen object which was intercepted by the sun's rays. Charles P. Cave, a meteorologist, writes upon April the 5th and the 8th in Ditcham Park, Petersfield, he had observed a similar appearance whilst watching some pilot balloons. But he described something not in the least like a shadow on the clouds, but a stationary cloud. The interference seemed to be that the shadow at Chisbury may have been the shadow of a pilot balloon. But here is the mystery. That the dark patches at Chisbury could not have been casted by a stationary pilot balloon that were to the west, or that were between the clouds and the setting sun. If it were to the west of Chisbury, a stationary object were high in the sky, intercepting the sun's rays, the shadow of the stationary object would not have been stationary, but would have moved higher and higher with the setting sun. I have to think of something that is in accord with no other data. A luminous body, not the sun in the sky, but for some unknown principle or atmospheric condition, its light extended down, only about to the clouds. From that where it suspended, two triangular objects like the objects that were seen in Bermuda, that it was at this light that fell short of the earth that these objects were intercepted, that the objects were drawn up and lowered from something overhead, so that in its light their shadows changed size. Two triangular luminous appearances were reported by several observers in Lebanon in July the 3rd, 1882, and on the moon's upper limb they disappeared, and the two dark triangular appearances looked like notches were seen 3 minutes later on the lower limb. They approached each other, met, and instantly disappeared. In Fort Worth, Texas, April 1913, a description of a shadow in the sky of some unseen body, supposedly to have been cast by an unseen cloud. This patchwork shape moved with the declining sun. Accounts by two observers of a faint but distinctive triangular object visible for 6 nights in the sky. It was observed from 2 stations that were not far apart, but the parallax was considerable. Whatever it was acceptably relatively close to the Earth. In May 1880, on a dark night, about 11:30 p.m, there was suddenly appeared on each side of a ship an enormous luminous wheel, whirling around the spokes of which seemed to brush the ship alongside. The spokes would be 200 or maybe 300 yards long and resembled birch rods. Each wheel contained about 16 spokes, although the wheels must have been some 500 or 600 yards in diameter. The spokes could be seen all the way around. The phosphorus gleam seemed to glide along the flat surface of the sea, no light being visible in the air above the water. The appearance of the spokes could be almost exactly represented by standing in a boat and flashing a bullseye lanterns horizontally along the surface of the water, around and around. The wheels advanced along with the ship for around 20 minutes. The writer then takes up the measurements that was given, calculates the velocity at the circumference of the wheel of about 166 yards per second. At midnight, February the 24th in 1885, latitude 37 degrees north and longitude 170 degrees east, somewhere between Yokohama and Victoria, the captain of the bark, Inuit, was aroused by his mate, who had seen something unusual in the sky. This must have taken appreciable time. The captain went on deck and saw the sky turning fiery red. All at once, a large mass of fire appeared over the vessel, completely blinding the spectators. The fiery mass fell into the sea. Its size may be judged by the volume of water cast up by it, said to have rushed towards the vessel with such a noise it was deafening. The ship was struck flat back and was roaring white seas passing ahead. The master, an old experienced mariner, declared that the awfulness of the sight was beyond description. In 1887, we are told that an object described as a large ball of fire was seen to rise from the sea near Cape Race. We are told that it rose to a height of 50 feet, then advanced close to a ship, then moved away remaining visible for about 5 minutes. The supposition of nature is that it was a ball lightning, and that he says it was enormous. The object had moved against the wind before retreating, said Captain Moore. On the June of 1845, according to the Malta Times, from Brigadier Victoria, about 900 miles east of Adelaide, there were 3 luminous bodies were seen to issue from the sea at about half a mile from the vessel, and they were visible for 10 minutes. Professor Bradwell had one letter from a correspondent in Mount Lebanon, describes just 2 luminous bodies. Apparently, they were 5 times the size of the moon. Each had appendages, or were connected by parts that were described like sail-like or streamer-like. Looks like the flags were blown by gentle breeze. The important note here is not only it suggests a structure, but duration. When the duration of meteors is a few seconds, the duration to 15 seconds is quite remarkable. But I think there are records up to half a minute. This object, if it were one object, was visible at Mount Lebanon for over an hour. An interesting circumstance is that all the appendages did not look like trains of meteors which shine by their own light, but it seemed to shine by the light from the main body. About 900 miles west of this position in Victoria, about the same time as the observation reported by a captain, Reverend F. Howitt, in Adelaide. He too saw this spectacle. He sent an account to proof. In his view, it was a body that appeared and then broke up in many pieces. He places the duration at 20 minutes to half an hour. My fire's almost out. A report to the Admiralty by Captain Evans, by a British Navy, that the Commander J.E. Pringle of the HMS Vulture had reported at latitude 26 north and longitude 53 11 degrees east in the Persian Gulf, In May the 5th, 1879, he'd noticed two luminous waves or pulsations in the water moving at great speed. This time we have a definitive datum upon the origin somewhere below the surface. He said that these waves of light passed under HMS Vulture. On looking towards the east, the appearance was of a revolving wheel with a centre on that bearing, and those spokes were illuminated and looking towards the east, and similar, the wheel appearing to be revolving but in the opposite direction. And as to be submerged, these waves of light extended from the surface well under the water. It is Commander Pringle's opinion that the shafts constituted one wheel that was doubling as an illusion. He judges the shaft to be about 25 feet broad and the spaces about 100. Velocity is about 84 miles an hour, and the duration time was 35 minutes. The Danish Meteorological Institute reports another instance. In the South China Sea at midnight, August the 12th, 1910, he saw a rotation of flashes. It looked like a horizontal wheel turning rapidly. This time it is said to appear just above the water. This phenomenon was observed by the captain, the first and second mate, and the first engineer, and all upon them it is said to make them uncomfortable impressions. In a meeting of the British Association in 1848, Sir W. S. Harris said that he had recorded an account sent to him of a vessel towards which had whirled two wheels of fire, which the men described as rolling millstones of fire. When they came near, an awful crash took place. The topmasts were shivered into pieces, and it is said there was a strong sulphur odour. Right, let's have a look at you people in the chat. Oh. Yeah, they're just perfect for cooking now. Hope everyone's all chilled. It's nearly 3 o'clock here. I'm so glad so many people have managed to hang around till now. Especially you UK lot. But it's nice to see everyone anyway. The stars are out, you just might not be able to see them. They're just not bright enough tonight for the camera. I'm with you, Julie. I'm waning too. Poor old Cosme is fast asleep. He's fast asleep. I think even if the fox walked right up to him now, he still wouldn't wake up. Well, I hope you like those few interesting facts there from Charles Fort. Certainly some weird stuff that has happened. And even, you know, there are reports of fish, you know, turning up dead in mass numbers. And they'll always just blame it on something straight away without actually, you know, giving you the real answer, because they don't know what the real answer is. And that's what the great thing about this construction is, you know, it gives us questions. You know, if we haven't got these questions and we just go along with what we're told, then that's pretty much like, you know, exactly, Julie. You're being told and not finding out. There's a big divide. It's nice being told what the truth is, you know, but is it the truth? There's been told the truth, and then there's been told a comfortable lie. Maybe it's indirect, they don't know themselves. And if they say something that fits a narrative, it backs up that narrative in one way or another. But you do have to question some of these these phenomena that some of the skeptics will just say there's a simple answer for. Yet, they stop at that. The more I find out, the more I don't know. I think that's the way it should be. That's what makes this place incredible. And if we think we do know it, then we've got a lot to know. There's certainly a lot to learn. Clint knows. Indeed. Of all the motions that we're told we're moving, we only see the slowest. How is that at all possible? I do like listening to the crackle of the last bits of the fire. It's either the cracking of the fire or the cracking of my knees. Right. I can see the glow looks like a face in a mask. Yeah, water is the key to everything. When it's the hardest thing and also the softest thing. And it also proves where we are. it would tell us which way we're up for a start, especially in an avalanche. You know, the first thing you do when you're avalanche and you stop panicking is to move the snow away from your mouth, and then it's to spit, and whichever way the spit falls, you dig the opposite direction. Oh, cheers, Clint. That was very kind of you to say that. Yeah, I'm just going to go through some old books that we've come across. We did a beekeeping last week. We got the Book of the Damned. So we'll have to see what we're going to do next week. I've got my last week here. So we'll probably do one next weekend as well. Maybe on the Sunday, a bit earlier perhaps. We shall see. I'll find out some good books during the week. Hey Phil, top man. You just turned up. You're woken up, have you? Yeah, no, definitely we'll be doing some more. I'll be in my new place as well by the first week of the new month. So we shall have to do a moving video too. That'll be cool. You were here and fell asleep. Well, yeah. You always like a little nap. I'm sure I'll catch you tomorrow on your drive. If you're out driving somewhere. Well, I'm going to love and leave all of you. Thank you ever so much for making it to this time, stupid time in the morning. I can just hear the frogs. In the distance. Yeah, thanks, hippie. Yeah, everything's at the moment, you know, fingers crossed. Touch wood. Let's touch a bit of wood. There you go. Touch a bit of wood. We're boxing every day now. We've still got a few more boxes to go. But organised is what my other half is. I just follow her lead. He didn't realise France was that close. Yeah. Yep, 41 likes. I think that might be my record actually. So far. But yeah, thanks ever so much everyone. Right, I will love you and leave you. I'll just like to say thank you very much for the trees that's made this possible for tonight. Keeping me warm and getting the lovely glow for everyone. And the ash will go into the bag for the apple trees next door. Right folks, I wish everyone a great day tomorrow, Sunday. Have a chilled day. I've got to drive 3 hours for my daughter for her gymnastics exam. And a 5-hour wait in between two kind of exhibitions that she's doing, and then a 3-hour drive back. So Sunday is going to be a great day, but it's going to be good. She's been looking forward to this for a long time. She's been working hard. You can preserve tomatoes in ash. Can you really? Yeah, didn't know that. Did not know that. But I knew that you could do eggs. I know that you can preserve eggs by rubbing them in oil. So yeah, I will love you and leave you. Thanks everyone for turning up tonight, and everyone be good. Take care all.